Welcome back to a numbers game with Ryan Girdusky. Thank you all for being here. I want to say happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm recording this the day before, so it is St. Patrick's Day as of recording of this. And I want to wish everyone who is of Irish ancestry who has Irish ancestry, I meant to say, who has Irish ancestry like myself, a very happy St. Patrick's Day. I hope you all celebrate being Irish, really being Irish, which apparently the president of Ireland and the prime minister of Ireland do not share my joy of the history of the Celtic people. I don't know if anyone saw it, but Michael Martin, the prime minister of Ireland, was in Washington on St. Patrick's Day. Attended an event in the morning with Vice President Vance. There was a prayer. President Vance blessed himself. Michael Martin didn't because the Irish politicians are allergic to being Catholic or having Catholic ancestry and lineage to them. Then sat with President Trump and noted how Ireland has just been thriving because of mass immigration. 1 in 4 people living in Ireland now is an immigrant. They've opened the floodgates across the country to Ireland and to the Middle East, and it's doing wonders for petty theft and for housing prices. And there's Irish citizens, rogue Irish citizens, burning down asylum hotels. He mentions none of that. He says the economy is thriving. And Trump, to his credit, actually did push back and said a lot of problems are coming with it. And then over in Ireland, you had the new Irish president, Catherine Connolly, who wore black, refused to call St. Patrick St. Patrick. She called him Patrick as if she was his drinking buddy, and then talked about how it's really a day about migration. For those who don't know the history of St. Patrick, he was a slave. He wasn't a migrant. It is an insult to call a son. He was a slave. I mean, There was no migration. There was no passport. He went there. He was forcibly brought to Ireland, but did great things with his time there. And it's absolutely infuriating. The Irish politicians who govern that country are embarrassments. I know I have a few Irish listeners. I have relatives who live in County Cork. I have relatives who live in Belfast. Um, it's an embarrassment. It's the most embarrassing politicians of any country in Europe, and England has Keir Starmer. That just goes to show how badly Ireland has fallen on its times. And Ireland is the last country in all of Europe, Western Europe especially, not to have an effective populist party pushing back on immigration. I know there's the Independence Ireland Party, but they're very small. They're very minor. They're trying to get it together. They only have, I think, 3 seats in their parliament. Not enough to have any kind of effective governing. And the three major parties all believe in the same thing, which is the erasure of Irish history, of Irish people, and Irish culture. Absolutely horrifying, especially on a day to celebrate the resilience of the Irish people and all that Ireland um, gave the world. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. And it's so funny. There is an app I see the ads on Instagram all the time. It's a history app. I don't know the name of it, but they one day talked about the 200,000 Irish orphans that were shipped to America and used basically as slave labor and Irish slavery, which is never talked about in this own country, and the endurance of the Irish people to survive despite famines and really horrific treatment. And now their politicians are willing to wipe that all away in the name of diversity. They have traded hatred for the English for hatred for themselves. And to quote a short little poem by Patrick Pearse, I am come of the seed of the people of that sorrow that have no treasure but hope, no riches laid a memory of an ancient glory. My mother bore me into bondage. In bondage, my mother was born. I come of the seed of the people that sorrow. There is no reason for Irish people to have any sense of guilt whatsoever or to destroy their heritage and their country by flooding it with migrants from across the world. Ireland needs, a place for the Irish. It is what it is. Anyway, I'm not an Irish citizen. I don't know why I care so much. I think it's because the Irish heritage, and I have relatives named Seamus. So I mean, it's about as Irish as it gets, and just to see that just our collective ancestry being washed away. Okay, enough about Ireland. Let's talk about America. Um, I know what you're all thinking right now. You're all thinking, Ryan, you were right again. How'd you know? How'd you do it? And you're probably also saying, what are you talking about? So I said a month ago on this podcast that Hakeem Jeffries is going to quickly wake up and realize that if he has a House majority in January, it will be the House that Bernie Sanders built. Bernie Sanders and progressive activists who love Bernie have been winning primaries across the country. They are changing the face of the Democratic Party. And a lot of them, not big fans of Hakeem Jeffries, and they're increasingly saying they're unsure if they're going to support him for House Speaker. Axios, that's what I said a month ago. Now, Axios is out with a new report that had a number of Democratic candidates coming forward and saying they are unsure who the next speaker will be, that they're not gung ho for Hakeem. This is according to Axios. Why it matters. It is a stark reversal from Jeffries' virtual untouchable standing in the Democratic Party just a few years ago, and a sign that his path to Speaker may be rockier than previously thought. Jeffries and his allies maintain there's not a remotely worried about a mass defection, pointing out that even the minority, he has endured 20 Speaker ballots and hasn't lost a Democratic vote. But this crop of freshmen may provide the first chink in heretofore impenetrable armor, with a block of genuinely viable candidates making clear that voting for Jeffries as Speaker is not a given if the Democrats take the House. As of now, there are 80 candidates running for a Congress this year who say they are not committed to backing Jeffries. That is not a small number, especially if Democrats find themselves in the same place that Kevin McCarthy did a couple of years ago. You have a majority, it's not a huge majority. What do? A couple of defections means you have to concede a lot of things to them. It means you're not guaranteed to get the speakership. And in the era of Trump 2.0, term 2.0, there is a lot of belief among rank and file, not rank and file, but activist Democrats. The Democratic Party is not doing enough to fight the orange man, right? The Democrats have gone along with funding the government, that they've gone along with other things that they should have been doing more. Whatever it is more, I don't know. I think some Democrat activists would have wanted the Democrats to shut down the government of day one. They possibly could have and kept the government shut down all 4 years. And Jeffries hasn't gone along with that because being leader means you have to govern responsibly. So no surprise that he didn't do that. What Jeffries has going for him is the same thing that McCarthy had going for him, is that there's no central opposition. Um, Pelosi faced opposition a few times while she was speaker, but there was a person running against her. There was a guy running against her and saying, I'm going to be the opposition. They always lost, but there was someone to rally troops against Pelosi. There is no one rallying troops against Jeffries. Like, there's no one rallying troops against McCarthy. They may be someone saying, I don't want him to be in power, but there's no one saying vote for me instead, which is important. Matt Gaetz didn't want McCarthy, but they didn't find a consensus candidate. It wasn't like Gaetz himself was being presented as a choice for speaker. There was nobody. It was either McCarthy or nobody. And they're kind of having the same situation with the Democratic Party right now. They don't have a singular person offering a progressive vision who could raise money, because that's a big part of the job, is who can raise money. Um, and the truth is, you can't beat somebody with nobody unless AOC or someone like that who has the belief, the support, the troops, the money. I can't emphasize money is very important for the speaker. You're not going to find somebody who can kind of break Hakeem Jeffries's lock on the Democratic Party. So Hakeem is safe right now, but things are dicey. And if they don't get their way, or they blank, or they cave one or two times, and they have a small majority, it's going to be very, very dicey for Hakeem Jeffries going forward. Um, anyway, that's my little nod to my audience telling. I told you guys I was ahead of the curve. I knew what was happening. And I think this is going to be a long-term issue for Hakeem Jeffries and whoever governs the Democrats in the House. The Democrats are going to act a lot more like the Republicans in the House when it comes to being less orderly. Now, I want to talk about something else that people think is very far into the future, but it's actually only a few months away. And that is the 2028 presidential election. I know some of you are like, Ryan, that's 4 years away. No, it's not. The first candidates who will announce their run for the White House will happen within the next 9 months. Basically, you could have a baby if you get pregnant today, and you will have a Democrat running for president or a Republican running for president by the time that baby is born. It's not a long time left before we're entering into the 2028 presidential cycle. And there's two essential questions, which is one, is JD Vance inevitable on the Republican side? And who is the most likely candidate on the Democratic side? Let's go into the Republican side first. I get messages about JD literally every single week from somebody saying, is the nomination process really over? What has he done to deserve the nomination? Is he ready to be president? Can we nominate someone else, or is somebody else going to run? Let me answer the last question first. Is someone else going to run? Yes, other people are going to run. Ted Cruz is almost definitely running for president. He believes that he's got some kind of compact with God where he ends up being president one day. He's almost destined. He's got this, destined from Christ himself to be president of the United States. Side note, do you guys remember when he picked Carly Fiorini as his vice presidential candidate and they kind of grasped hands and missed each other's hands at the rally? I don't know why that kind of flashed in my memory as I was recalling Ted Cruz running for president, but it did. I've also heard rumors that Brian Kemp, governor of Georgia, is strongly considering a run. Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, is considering a run. I've heard Josh Hawley, the senator from Missouri, is asking questions. Rand Paul says that he's exploring his options. He's a senator from Kentucky. Steve Bannon, I've heard for a while, wanted to run, but the Epstein stuff, the idea that he made this videotape with Epstein, not those kinds of tapes, but a different kind of tape with Epstein, and was interviewing him and never released the footage, and could have been very complimentary to Epstein, possibly in the footage. Whatever the case may be, I heard it's really hurt his potential of running. There's other people who want to run but don't really have a lane. Tulsi Gabbard, I heard, is interested but doesn't know if she has got a lane. RFK Jr. very much wants to make a run for something and doesn't know if he has a lane. And then there's the 900-pound elephant in the room, which is Marco Rubio. Now, Rubio has been doing exceptionally good job as Secretary of State, and everyone has taken notice, including the president. And it's clear that Rubio is having an effect on the president's thinking when it comes to foreign policy. According to several reports, President Trump has asked multiple people if he should endorse Vance or Rubio for president. And at least one report said that a lot of donors really do love Rubio. They love Rubio more. Also, I want to point out that Susie is very close to Rubio as well, Susie, the chief of staff. Now, polling on the 2028 presidential race is very, very difficult because there are multiple names that are being floated in these polls who are not running. Like Donald Trump Jr. is not running for president. There is no reason why a pollster is throwing his name on a poll because it changes the poll's outcome because he polls very, very high. He's the president's son. And it absolutely affects the way that these polls are coming out and the certainty of these polls. So, of the polls that just have the most likely contenders, Vance has a formidable 20 to 30 point lead against Rubio, who's a distant second. And then DeSantis is in third, and he's just in the high single digits. In early swing states and polls, like in New Hampshire, Vance is more than 50%. Even Rubio is not even in double digits. Now, obviously, if Trump were to endorse Rubio over Vance, that would change things considerably. But I have a hard time seeing that happen. And here's the reason. Vance is doing fundraising for the 2026 midterms. Vance is creating these independent relationships with donors. Vance is also, while his campaign isn't up and running yet, it will escalate quickly after the midterms, and it will have a lot of the infrastructure from the Trump 2024 campaign on his side. And Rubio, I think that's why Rubio has firmly said, I'm not running if Vance is running. Now, if there's going to be some kind of upset where Rubio shocks everybody and announces, it has to be in the next 6 months. Because it's got to be, you have to get the jump start to create a parallel organization and kind of take over part of the Trump organization that I don't think that Vance would just give up on his own. So no, I don't think that Vance is inevitable. But if you were a betting man and you're placing your house on the betting markets, you should bet on Vance. That's what my opinion. Now, on the Democratic side, there's so many people running, it is becoming a clown car. You have Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, Senator from New Jersey Cory Booker, you have Pete Buttigieg, you have Rahm Emanuel, former White House Chief of Staff for President Obama and Mayor of Chicago. You have Josh Green, the governor of Hawaii. I had to look him up too. I didn't know who Josh Green was when I first read that he was considering running. Kamala Harris, the former Democratic nominee from 2024. Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona. Senator Ruben Gallego from Arizona. Congressman Ro Khanna from California. Governor Gavin Newsom from California. Congressman Alexander Ocasio-Cortez from New York, Senator John Ossoff from Georgia, Governor J.B. Pritzker from Illinois, and Governor Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania. Okay, that is the people who are running on the Democratic side so far. Those are the names being floated so far. Early polls at this far out without someone sitting in office really is about name ID. And obviously, Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom have the highest name ID. They have the upper hand in these polls. But what is more important than the name recognition for the Democratic nomination is the calendar. No one is talking about this. See, the Democratic primaries has changed significantly, where states like Iowa and New Hampshire, which used to go first, have been pushed aside from South Carolina. The Democratic Party says they're too white. And, white people, if they get a voice in the Democratic Party, it's, that's bad news. It can't let a white man from the Midwest have a voice in the Democratic Party. Absolutely not allowed. So they've moved to South Carolina, which is a majority Black voting population for the Democratic primary. And that is the way that most of the Deep South still is. There's something like Florida. I don't think that is like that anymore. Texas is not like that anymore. But most of the states in the South are still Black majority Democratic voting base. And they favor candidates who are more establishment, who are more centrist, and they give the Democratic nomination. It is almost virtually impossible to win the Democratic nomination without the support of older Black women in the Deep South. They nominated Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton. Only I think John Kerry, and only because John Kerry won all the states before the South. And so by that point, he was just kind of cleaning up. I think he lost I think he lost North and South Carolina, but he was the only one, and he was able to sweep basically everywhere else. He might have lost one other state to I think maybe lost Oklahoma as well, but he basically swept the entire race very, very quickly. But he was once again the only one. So you need the Deep South. You need old ladies, the black old ladies, Deep South, and who they support is who the likely Democratic nominee eventually will be. They're not going to support a Pete Buttigieg. They're not going to vote for a gay candidate. They're not going to support a radical left winger. They're not going to support a Bernie Sanders. They probably will not support an AOC. So that's who you have to keep an eye out for. If you're going to stare at crosstabs and polls, that's who you want to look at. How are Black voters in the South considering who are they voting for? Right now, they really do like Kamala Harris still because she was the nominee. She's a Black woman. We'll see if they find favor or love with anybody else. But right now, according to the most recent poll, there's been no polls in South Carolina, but according to the most recent nationwide polls, 36% of Black voters say Kamala Harris. And if she holds true to that, she could absolutely be the nominee again. With me to discuss all things 2028 is the great journalist, Mark Halperin. That's coming up next. With me to discuss the 2028 election is legendary journalist, Mark Halperin of Next Up with Mark Halperin and Two-Way fame. Thank you so much for coming on, Mark.
Honored to be here, sir. Thank you for including me.
So, Mark, the question I get all the time, and I get asked literally once a week, is JD Vance inevitable? What is your opinion on that?
I thought he was, and now I don't. I think that three things have happened that make him short of inevitable. He's still the base case. I think still the most likely outcome, probably still by far, is that he decides to run, the president endorses him, and he's the nominee by consensus and probably runs with Marco Rubio. But three things have happened. First of all, the rise of Rubio, just the groundswell of interest in him and support of him, and the belief amongst many stakeholders that Rubio would be a better nominee is pretty big. So that's number one. Number two, Vance has rubbed some people the wrong way in his public appearances and his private meetings with donors. He's just went from a run of 9 months or so of extreme popularity and being extremely well received to now some people having questions about his personality and about his failure to repudiate people like Tucker Carlson. So some doubts about him. And then lastly, as it's become kind of a possibility that it won't be Vance, whether Ted Cruz runs or other people run, there's just a sentiment of he needs to earn this, that it wouldn't be in the party's interest and it wouldn't be right to simply hand him the nomination, and that there should be whatever needs to happen to make it a competitive process needs to happen. So those three things have combined to make me pull back from my view that it was a mortal lock for Vance.
Well, I mean, Ted Cruz is going to run no matter what. Ted Cruz thinks that he's got a contract with Jesus Christ to be president one day. That is this, this vision from above. Um, I don't care who's running besides that. And there's other people who want to run. I know Ron DeSantis has made phone calls. I know that Brian Kemp has made phone calls. There are people who have that dream of the presidency hasn't lost upon them. But there is a belief among people in Vance camp that there shouldn't that the vice president shouldn't even be on a debate stage with anybody else. That he should be running by himself. Is that, you think, the wrong opinion to make among Republican voters?
Well, it's a long time before voters have a say in this. And I still think that there's a chance Vance will decide with his young children not to run. I just wouldn't rule that out. But if he decides to run, I find it hard to believe that he wouldn't get the president's endorsement. And then the question is, as the RNC finance chair, which is a unique slot to be given to an incumbent vice president with presidential ambitions, as someone who still retains an extraordinary amount of goodwill within the party as the front runner in the polls, I think he'd win every element of the invisible primary well before any votes were cast. So that's what would lead him to get Trump's endorsement, and I think to largely clear the field again well before anybody voted. To voters, eventually, if he refused to debate, if he didn't clear the field, would they care? Maybe, but I think the question will largely be answered before a vote is cast.
Why is Trump asking about Rubio all of a sudden? Does Trump all of a sudden have a feeling like he's not as strong, or that Rubio is so great?
I'm an expert in politics and campaigns and government, not in psychology, but I'll do my best. I think he loves central casting. The concept of central casting. He loves people who do well on TV, and he's fascinated by kind of the anthropology, right? So I think he thinks it's interesting how often he hears from people at Mar-a-Lago and members of Congress and reporters who he talks to. Rubio's kind of awesome. Isn't Rubio awesome? He thinks, well, that's interesting. Why are people talking so much about how awesome Rubio is? Then I think, as much as he may want to anoint Vance eventually, he likes competition. He likes to put scorpions in a bottle or go to the Bronx to a cockfight and see people hammer each other. And then, again, he's a pretty sophisticated TV producer. He sees what I see, which is Vance has had some less than sure-footed moments in public, and Rubio has not of late. So probably all those things just make him want to make mischief. And he knows that even if his thought is, if I'm right, that eventually he's going to endorse Vance, there's no cost to doing this now, and probably he sees an upside that Vance should have some competition. Because if he endorsed Vance right away, or if he only said nice things about Vance, I think he probably believes Vance would get to the general election without any sort of test. And as you know, often candidates who have rough nomination fights go into the general election a lot more battle tested and ready for the fight than if they cruise to the nomination.
Also, he does create the situation where he really is a lame duck once there's a nominee to follow. It is a certain site. Steve Bannon once said if Trump could be the last president ever, that would be his dream. Because he really would never want that to happen. And then, and last part of this before we go on is, the Tucker Carlson correlation with Vance is what I hear about so often, particularly from Jewish friends of mine, Jewish political activists, Jewish donors. I think it is really actually haunting him with a certain segment of the population that can't be understated. I mean, it's real. It's not fake anymore. I believe things are fake until I've heard it a million times. I'm like, okay, maybe it's real, but I do believe it's real.
It's for them. It's a question of character and values, and I think for some of them, it's a question of competence. They think it's a no-brainer to distance from Tucker, and it's not just Tucker. Those college Republicans who had the text chain where they made jokes about Hitler. Some other people in MAGA, like the vice president's attitude seems to be in kind of a, I would say, almost childish way, is to be like, I'm not going to repudiate people just because people tell me to repudiate people, without regard to, well, would you repudiate Osama bin Laden, right? So I totally agree with you that I hear it all the time. And like I said, it's not just that it kind of rubs them the wrong way from a like a political point of view. It really, they think it speaks to his values. And of course, it plays into the doubts that a lot of people have had about him over the course of his time in public life, that he went from saying Trump was the Republican Party's Hitler to saying Trump was the greatest president of all time. And some people see in him a phony
Mhm.
and a person without values and without a North Star. And the Tucker stuff plays into that for a lot of people, not just Jews, but a lot of Jews.
Yeah, it is a lot of yeah. Okay, so on the Democratic side, Mark has this great ranking. I watch it every time he posts a new one of the Democratic primary. Who is the most likely to get it? Who's not? Who's the least likely to get it? You have been famously bearish on Gavin Newsom for a very long time until recently. You are extremely bullish though on Rahm Emanuel, in my opinion, much more so than I would. I
No.
really. You speak very favorably about his possibilities of him being a nominee.
Truly, my sources do, and I report what they say. I don't.
Uh-huh.
I think there's a very small chance of his being the nomination. Probably none, except if lots of people don't run and the
Uh-huh.
establishment just gathers around him. I think his record with one of your favorite groups, the teachers unions in Chicago. I think his lack of bedside manner. I think his being Jewish, being short. I think that he's an opposition researcher's dream. No, I'm
Mhm.
I'm I'm sorry I gave you the wrong impression. He's on my list of 8 because it's such a weak field, and because
Mhm.
he does have so much support from the establishment. And under certain circumstances, I believe he could be endorsed by both Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, which for a lot of voters could make a difference. Endorsements really do, but I think those might. So I'm not bullish on him at all.
What what
I'm aware though that a lot of my sources are.
what in your opinion, I because I said this in my monologue, the calendar is very important. If South Carolina goes first, black women in the South play an extraordinarily, their vote really, really, really matters, and they are the vote
Yeah.
that saved Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. Who is playing to the progressive base who lives in New Hampshire and Vermont, and who is playing to black women in the Deep South and playing them strong? Because it's a completely set of different values.
Well, yes and no. I mean, in this field, in this Democratic Party, I don't know that that's some sort of like existential choice between the two. I think right now, at this phase at least, what voters, whether they're Bernie Sanders, living on the New Hampshire border, Vermont border in New Hampshire, or whether they're 70-year-old black women who vote regularly in South Carolina, they want someone who'll stand up to Trump. They want someone who's got energy. They want someone who seems to be able to bridge the divides within the party and within the country. So I think unlike some past cycles, and again, partly it's because the calendar's unsettled and partly because the field's so weak, I don't see lots of specialization in terms of either demographics or geography at this point. I think everybody is trying to play everywhere, and because no one is particularly strong, you can beat Pete Buttigieg, historically, comically weak with black voters, and say I'm going to make a play for that. Because with the exception of Kamala Harris, there's really no one in the potential field who has some sort of historic or deep hold on black women voters.
I have told pollsters to put a poll in South Carolina or in Alabama or wherever, where you put Pete Buttigieg up against a fictional Democrat and see who
Mm.
polls higher with black voters. I would actually like to see if as I bet it's not Pete Buttigieg. Um, but I think that I think there's a cautionary tale with Kamala Harris in 2024, where she famously said that she would give transgender illegal aliens free medical care. And it really did actually hurt her base with regular voters and for the love of progressives that she didn't end up getting anyway. Um,
Mm.
is there caution exist today at all? Like, hey, we can't go too far to the left. I know Andy Bashir does it, but does anybody else?
Well, your favorite candidate, Rahm Emanuel, does. Gavin
Yeah.
Newsom does it. Gavin Newsom does it episodically. I think there's part of why this is so unsettled, besides, again, the weakness of the field and the lack of a DNC sanctioned nominating calendar, is there's 2 variables that if you look at the elections of 2016 and 2020, you would say would be a super source of strength for the Democratic nominee, because I believe Senator Sanders would have been the nominee in 16 and in 20 if the DNC hadn't agreed the rules to keep him from winning. One is super progressive, and with the exception of AOC and Ro Khanna, there's no one else in my top list that are super progressive, like single payer,
Yeah.
Green New Deal, all that. So that's one. And then the other is sort of populist outsider that no member of Congress except AOC need apply. Even governors might not be outsider enough, right? So it's hard to know because 24 is not part of the sample space because we had an incumbent president and then he handed it off to an incumbent vice president. But most of the fingertip feel my sources have, and I have for the Democratic Party, says a populist, super left wing outsider is a good lane. It may not win, but it's a good lane. And again, I don't think AOC will run in the end. And so someone has to fill that lane. And I don't see it right now. I don't see who that person is.
Yeah, it's funny. Also, thing I'm hearing from Democratic consultants and activists is no women. I've heard from multiple Democrats saying we are not voting for a woman this time.
Right. So
Like
you
more
hear
than
no
one.
women, you hear no Jew, you hear no
Mhm.
gay, you hear no non-white. So that doesn't leave a lot of people. That leaves Gavin Newsom and Andy Bashir for the most part.
I do not believe that Josh Shapiro conversation happened where they accused him of being an agent or asked if he was an agent for Israel. I don't believe that happened whatsoever.
I mean, I don't know. I'm agnostic on that, but I don't think that specific or the general question of whether he makes stuff up are very big problems compared to most of the other candidates.
Well, yeah, that's true. Okay, so if you had your ranking now, who is the top person who is leading the field? The weak field, mind you, but the leading the field.
I think Newsom and Shapiro are head and shoulders above everyone else, but I don't think Newsom's going to make it to the starting line in the end. And I think Shapiro has massive flaws. But I also don't believe in this white knight theory that somebody surprising is going to come through. So my current bet is it's going to be Buttigieg, as implausible as that is. But until they prove either they're not running or they're weak, I think it'd be either Newsom or Shapiro.
I literally gasped. That is a hot take. If you could compare this field as a student of history, compare this field to any other previous primary, which one would it be? Is this like 2004, 2000 and I don't even know, 1992?
2004 was a pretty weak field, but I think this is currently the weakest field.
Well, Mark Halperin, thank you so much. Where can people go to read all your stuff, listen to you? Your shows are always must watch in my household.
I appreciate that. Next up on YouTube or twoway.tv, you can find some of my content there. That's plenty.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Great to see you.
Now it's time for the Ask Me Anything segment. If you want to be part of the Ask Me Anything segment, email me Ryan@numbersgamepodcast.com. That's Ryan at numbers, plural numbersgamepodcast.com. This question comes from my buddy Peter Fomo. He says, if the SAVE Act passes, what is your opinion on whether or not it will help Republicans? I assume it will help, but my concern is that Republican, the low propensity voters may not get the effort to register. Maybe, I mean, it affects new registrations on existing ones. I think it will have a minimal effect. Where I think it could have a large effect, the place is going to have the biggest effect is in states with automatic voter registration. So among swing states, places like Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Georgia. In Georgia, I think it will actually help Republicans a lot. A lot of low propensity, mostly black voters who do turn out for Joe Biden, who turn out for Stacey Abrams, who turn out for, any Democrat. They will likely not be able to automatically get voter registration, which means they have to do the work and not just show up on election day, which would probably decrease voter turnout among that population. But it's going to be very small, my bet. And I don't think it's going to necessarily change the economy too much. I would guess if I had to put money on where it helps Republicans, it will affect automatic voter registration, and that will impede probably automatic registration in states that in states with large populations of low propensity Democratic voters like Nevada and Georgia. That's my guess. We'll see. We'll see if it even passes. I mean, they're coming up to a problem now with Lisa Murkowski not supporting it. So who knows? I mean, it's going to be by the skin of their teeth if they get this thing through. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, that's this episode. If you like this podcast, please like and subscribe in the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And I will talk to you guys on Friday. Bye.